Before we get started, got to give a big shout out to OpenFortune for making today's episode possible. Super excited about this one. Joining us today is Jono Smith, the man behind the magic at Make-A-Wish America, where he's the Senior Director of Brand Communications and Digital. Jono's the mastermind driving the brand's voice across all right channels, earned, owned, and social media. Before he started making wishes come true, Jono held down senior marketing roles and comms gigs at places like Event 360, Network for Good, Aleutian, and even the Clinton White House. Yep, he's got stories. And a BA in English from Loyola Marymount and roots deep in San Francisco. Jono's journey has taken him from the foggy Bay Area to the sun-soaked streets of Phoenix. But today, he's here with us, and Jono, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be here.
Awesome, man. I got to ask too, right? Like, what was your job when you wanted your dream job growing up?
You know, growing up in San Francisco really influenced my career in a big way. Growing up in the city, this was in the 70s and 80s. Gets a lot of bad press today, and I had a very romantic experience in San Francisco. But San Francisco is all about experiences, it's all about culture, and all about philanthropy. And those three things really formed what I wanted to do with my life. And so it was less about like specific industries or career goals, but using those as guideposts to find job experiences that would be inspiring to me. And San Francisco obviously has a really strong...
And how would you define inspiring? Like, what does that mean to you?
I mean, changing the world, honestly. I know it sounds a little cliched and trite, but at the end of the day, if I can find a way to make a living while making the world a better place, that was what was most interesting to me.
Cool. And what was step one there? I mean, I think a lot of people have that mindset, right? That want to help, right? They want to be of civic service. But sometimes, you know, in a capitalistic world, dreams die, right? But how did you kind of continue marching on and make that a possibility for yourself?
Yeah, I think two things. One, I was really inspired by my mom's story. When she graduated from college, she went to Berkeley. She moved as far away from her parents as possible and moved to New York City. Met my dad, who was on a business trip from London, and they lived in London for 10 years before moving back to San Francisco. So that wanderlust was very inspiring to me. And then two, going back to San Francisco, from, you know, iconic figures like Harvey Milk, Dianne Feinstein. I grew up with great role models and great stories around me. And so those really drove what came next for me.
You end up getting a gig as the special assistant for communications at the White House, right? That's got to be pretty surreal, you know, as somebody in their 20s, right? How did that experience, how did you land that, and what did it teach you?
Yeah, I think when you're in your 20s, you have no fear a lot of the time, and you really need to take advantage of that while you have it, because each decade that it creeps in where fear is more present from a career and job change standpoint. And so I just said, let's, literally follow the dream, which was I was inspired by President Clinton. I was inspired by public service. And my boss at the time had worked in the Ford White House. The Democratic convention was coming to Chicago. And I went down and volunteered and just was in the right place at the right time and met Hillary Clinton's chief of staff, who offered me a White House internship. So I quit my job and moved to D.C. for an unpaid White House intern.
That is so awesome. And what was expectation versus reality of that experience?
So once I got in, it was all about trying to land a paying permanent job in the White House. And I was competing with tons of people who had worked on the campaign for years and were still looking for jobs in the administration, let alone the White House. And so I had to build my personal brand and credibility and reputation inside the White House as a hardworking intern, working around the clock, staying on weekends. And ultimately, again, right place, right time, a person got promoted, and I was offered a position in the communications office working for the director of White House communications.
There you go. And what did you learn from that experience?
The day after I started that permanent job, the Monica Lewinsky story broke. And I went from a job where perfect timing, where I thought I would be talking about policy every day from a communication standpoint, to crisis communications and reputation management. And I was able to learn crisis comms from some of the smartest PR people in the world there in the Clinton White House as we were managing all the incoming fire from that impeachment situation that was going on. And that really sparked interest in reputation management for me and crisis comms.
Absolutely. And you end up taking a leap to Lucian, right? You're there for almost 8 years. What is Lucian, and what made it a great place? Because 8 years is a nice amount of time to spend at it. But
Yeah, so when the Clinton administration ended, I was, again, inspired by that call for public service, but I wanted to work for a for-profit that helped nonprofits. And Lucian, which was then called Canvas Pipeline, was a startup. It was a .com. This was 2000. I was the 49th employee, and our focus was revolutionizing how colleges and universities use the internet. So back then, you couldn't even register for class online, and we were trying to build digital campuses and convince CIOs who were very conservative that they needed to bring everything online. And so that was the vision of Canvas Pipeline. We ended up getting acquired 4 different times and have a product that is now part of the fabric of digital campuses at all major colleges and universities.
So amazing. And you've worked with so many different great brands, right, including Wildlife, NBC News, all of those. I'm curious how you've seen like corporate comms, especially in the civic service and nonprofit landscape, evolve over this time.
It's been particularly fascinating over the past 4 years, watching the swing from corporate activism to corporate neutrality, and which is where it seems a lot of corporations and brands are now landing. Obviously, a lot of scandal on college campuses in the last couple of years have forced that decision for different reasons. And I think we're now in a better place from a comm standpoint with corporations being able to balance doing the right thing, but maintaining neutrality when it really matters to their constituents.
And how has technology played a role in that change?
I don't think it perhaps has played enough of a role, and that may be part of the reason we got into this situation is corporations fell back to traditional communications channels when a lot of this unrest and scandal was going on, and they weren't listening to their young constituents and the conversations they were having online and in technology and really learning from those. And so I think that was potentially a big failure and lesson to that extent.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious, I like asking this question to people who work at these great companies, have been there for a long time. What was your first impression of Make-A-Wish, like just as a consumer, right? As somebody who saw their content or even donated there?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Make-A-Wish, and it was, part of my childhood fabric. People in my community, classmates who had wishes. And then when the big Backhead wish happened in San Francisco 10 plus years ago, it was the first time I'd really seen the Make-A-Wish name in a long time. And as I investigated the brand and saw all the strengths it had, it felt like the best hidden story in the nonprofit world. And I was really inspired to want to help elevate that brand and elevate the story.
What do you think was hidden about the story?
A couple of things. One, there were some really basic brand familiarity challenges. A majority of Americans still today think that Make-A-Wish is a dying wish for terminal children, and the mission has evolved beyond that to be inclusive of kids with critical illnesses. And so Make-A-Wish is perceived by a lot of Americans as a very sad thing, and they don't really understand the hopeful side of it and how essential it is.
They brought you on in 2014. What were some pain points that you were looking to solve, or they were looking for you to solve?
So really 3 things. Number one, educating and helping improve the understanding of how we are funded. Make-A-Wish is funded by individual donations. We have amazing corporate support, but 2/3 of our funding comes from individuals making donations to the organization. That's a bit. Number 2 was that impact question, and be able to demonstrate to communities the impact of the Make-A-Wish experience on a family or an entire community, like we saw with the Backhead wish. And then number 3 is that perception around who we serve, and that Make-A-Wish is more than a last wish; it's a lifelong wish.
Sure. And I think you have such an interesting title. Everybody knows about Make-A-Wish, right? And being behind the brand and the comms, right? What is that? I know every day is different, right? But what are you responsible for, and what does that day-to-day responsibility look like?
Yeah, I mean, we have a really lean model, and so I get to do a lot of different things. In the last couple of years, I've inherited our streaming, gaming, and virtual fundraising program. And so my team actually just got back from TwitchCon. They are working with a ton of different streamers, a ton of different gamers to fundraise through our Stream for the Wishes program. Our organic social media channels are enormous, and like everyone, we're battling the algorithms and the decrease in organic reach to get our message out there. All of our own media channels, our website, wish.org, our microsites are part of my team. And then finally, national media relations. We were really fortunate to have tremendous relationships with the morning shows and the evening news, and they do a tremendous job of telling the Maker's story.
What are you most proud of all the accomplishments you've completed over the last 10 years?
About 5 years ago, we implemented a custom brand equity tracker. Up until that point, we were relying on ride-along surveys and third-party research, and we now have our own custom brand research that guides us and tells us how we're doing. And we've seen improvements in all those three areas I talked about earlier from a brand familiarity standpoint, and that's been really the most rewarding.
That really is rewarding because that is lifelong change, and a brand will lead to more donations, obviously, right?
Yeah, we have 96% aided awareness in the U.S., and so we don't need any more awareness. We need to do a better job of converting that to consideration and encouraging more Americans to donate to Make-A-Wish. And so that remains our number one brand.
And how are you solving that, John?
Well, what we've learned is that donors have a 3 times lifetime value if they understand correctly the impact of a wish and who we serve. And so literally by changing those misperceptions, the lifetime value goes up by 3x.
Absolutely. And when you came in 2014, right, how is the brand different than it is today or evolved? Or is it the same? Obviously, it's a very similar mission, right? But
one of the biggest switches we made was really adopting that hero's journey in storytelling. We were talking too much about ourselves, and we had very one-note storytelling at the time. We were telling one story over and over. And so we really diversified our storytelling, and we now tell the stories of our donors, our volunteers, our medical professionals, certainly the kids who receive the wishes, but their siblings, their parents, their grandparents. And so really diversifying storytelling has been beneficial to helping those brand familiarity challenges.
Very cool. And talk about your team too. And, it takes a village to make all of this happen, right? How do you choose the right people to lead? And how does your leadership affect that?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate to have a very tenured team, folks who started out as interns and who stayed there for 10 plus years. And so it's really that balance of we need people with the heart and the dedication to the mission, but more than that, we need problem solvers and people who are inspired by solving problems every day. Because if you're just there for the mission piece, that's very romantic and all, but it doesn't raise the money and it doesn't grant wishes.
Yeah. Talk about your personal life as well. What are some things that you're proud of there? What do you do for fun?
Oh, right. I'm allowed to have a personal life. I would say having a 13-year-old golden doodle named Lala and being a dog dad is a big focus. When I was in the White House, I actually came out of the closets. I was inspired by a speech that President Clinton gave to the Human Rights Campaign. And so I was one of the youngest openly gay staff members in the Clinton White House. And so I've remained very connected to LGBTQ plus rights and human rights issues and supporting the various organizations that are involved in that space.
That's so awesome. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
I do a lot of mentorship calls with college students from my alma mater or other places where I'm speaking. And they always ask, well, what advice do you have? And for me, it's really two things. If I could go back and change anything, it would be sharpening the analytics skills. I was never an Excel person. I was, very data driven, but didn't necessarily have, being an English major, have that math and science background to really broaden those skills. And so that would be the first thing I would change. And I now have a nephew who's in the sports analytics business, and I see what he's able to accomplish with those skills. And so I still think that is something that is not getting enough attention in higher education. And then two, in one of my first jobs, the VP of sales gave us all a business book called Who Moved My Cheese, a very cliched business book. And I read this and I was like, I can't live my life by business books. And so I very deliberately kind of shunned a lot of the conventional wisdom and a lot of the conventional business cons that are out there, and really just tried to chart my own path and be more intention focused than goal focused.
Yeah, what are some of those intentions?
Right now, it's all about helping kids with critical illnesses, and that became very personal for me about 5 years into Make-A-Wish. My niece was diagnosed with a rare disease, and she spent almost 2 weeks in the pediatric ICU. She almost lost her life. She's now thriving and in grad school. And so Make-A-Wish went from something very abstract to me to something very personal, and I got to see how it impacted our family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm about just doing it right now. If there's one thing that listeners can take away from this episode, what would that be?
I get very frustrated as I'm scrolling LinkedIn with all of that conventional wisdom and, the talk about you need your SMART goals and you need all of these things that are feel very carbon copy and lack a lot of creativity. And there's a place for that. Certainly, I've gotten where I am by having goals at time. But you don't have to do what Seth Godin says. You don't have to do what Gary Vee says. You can chart your own course. You can take bits and pieces from all of them. But, be your own.
No, I love that advice. And also, you can't just follow everyone else's advice, because then if everybody's doing it, nobody's going to be successful there again. So I appreciate you not going against the grain, but kind of having a different unorthodox approach to it. Before we get in the quick question round, just got to give OpenFortune a big shout out for making today possible. All right, here we go, Jono. Person you'd most want to sit down to dinner with, dead or alive?
I mean, I have not seen President Clinton since I left the White House in 2000. So he was such an inspiring person for me, and so I would love to go back
that'd be awesome. Favorite city in the world?
I lived in London for 2 years on an expat assignment. And while I was there, I got to travel to Beirut and visit the American University in Beirut, especially now with all of the unrest that's going on there. Beirut used to be like Paris of the Middle East, and I just fell in love with Beirut.
Is it okay to sleep with socks on?
No comment.
No comment. Favorite rom-com?
Will and Grace.
Best spot to eat in Phoenix?
The locally owned restaurants, and Postino is a local restaurant that I'm a big fan of.
Favorite Loyola Marymount grad?
The late Hank Gathers. When I was a senior in high school, Hank died on the basketball court and inspired, I think, a generation of LMU students.
In 40 years, what will people be nostalgic for?
Hopefully not Twitter.
Top 3 brands right now that you think are doing a great job?
I don't want to sound like a shill, but Brand Week. This experience here at Brand Week has been incredible. The content has been off the charts. They announced a partnership yesterday for the conference they're doing next year. It's going to be very experiential, and so that's is going to be incredible.
Very cool.
Number 2, the Chautauqua Institution in Western New York. It's a nonprofit that sits by a lake in Western New York that inspires people by attracting some of the best speakers in the world during the summer. And I've spent many summers there.
One thing people don't understand about working for Make-A-Wish is
there's an obsession with overhead when it comes to evaluating nonprofits, and no for-profit person would ever run their business being obsessed by overheads, and they need to leave that at the door when they evaluate nonprofits.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
I was in an interview once, and the interviewer asked me what my 5-year plan was, and I told him I didn't have the 5-year plan, and he basically ended the interview and said I would never get anywhere in life without a 5-year plan.
Well, yeah, isn't that like Mao Zedong's 5-year plan goes down as like the worst 5-year plan of all time or something? So, in one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
It's still too scary, and I'm not just saying that because we're in a scary presidential election cycle, but we were targeted by a misinformation campaign at Make-A-Wish during the pandemic. And I got to see how scary the internet can be, and that involved death threats against our CEO, and so the internet is a scary place. Yeah.
Who's somebody you think should hop on this podcast?
I'm a big fan of Kara Swisher and her view on the tech world and how she holds tech leaders accountable and for approach to journalism. So whoever the young Kara Swisher is, I find them.
And then in 10 years, where can we catch you, Jono?
Retired and traveling the world. I love to travel. Loved my time living in London. Would love to live in Paris at some point, and so hopefully doing that.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you in Paris. We'll do another episode there.